Hello children, is it not very exciting to learn about the supercomputer of the human body, the brain? Yes, absolutely. Our brain is a supercomputer that can store lots of information and have tremendous learning, imagination and thinking powers. Tell me one thing, how your body position is supported when you stand, lean, bend and sit. The backbone or spinal cord gives you support for the posture of the body. The spinal cord continues with the brain to make the central nervous system. I am Shubhajit, will explain to you another interesting topic, the spinal cord and peripheral nervous system from the lesson Control and Coordination of Class 10 Biology. The role of the spinal cord in nervous control was studied largely by the experimentalists of the 16th and 17th century. Animals were shown to have the ability to respond to stimuli even when their brain was removed. Leonardo da Vinci and Stephen Hales both recorded surviving of frogs whose brains had been destroyed. The animals still produced muscular movements if their skin was pinched or pricked. Both observers further recorded that the animal died as soon as the spinal cord was damaged by pushing a needle down it. Such evidence suggested that the spinal cord was not simply a trunk road for instructions from the brain, but might be a control center on its own learning outcomes. After studying this topic, you will be knowing about spinal cord, structure and functions, peripheral nervous systems, autonomic nervous system. Keywords: spinal cord, peripheral nervous system, dorsal horn, ventral horn, white matter, grey matter, spinal nerves, cranial nerves, autonomic nervous system. Sympathetic nervous system, parasympathetic nervous system, let us see the concept map on the nervous system. Spinal cord. Spinal cord is a cylindrical structure lying in the neural canal of the vertebral column. It is also covered by meninges. It extends from the lower end of the medulla oblongata to the first lumbar vertebra. The posterior region of the spinal cord tapers into a thin, fibrous thread-like structure called filum terminale. Unlike the brain, the white matter is towards the periphery, while the grey matter is towards the center of the spinal cord. Myelinated axons leaves the spinal cord from the both sides of the vertebral column. Internally, the spinal cord contains a cerebrospinal fluid filled cavity known as central canal. The grey matter of the spinal cord is H-shaped. The upper end of the letter H forms posterior horns and the lower end forms anterior horns. A bundle of fibers passes into the posterior horn, forming a dorsal afferent root. Fibers pass outward from the anterior horn, forming the ventral or efferent root. These two roots join to form spinal nerves. The white matter is external and has bundle of nerve tracts. The nerves that originate from the brain are called cranial nerves, and those that originate from the spinal cord are called spinal nerves. The cranial nerves are of 12 pairs and spinal nerves are of 31 pairs. The spinal nerves branch out to reach many organs in the trunk region like the heart, lungs, stomach, urinary bladder, and sex glands. These spinal nerves are made up of both sensory and motor nerve fibers. The spinal cord is concerned with the coordination of movement of limbs and organs and is the center of reflex actions. Cerebrospinal fluid. The brain is suspended in a special fluid environment called cerebrospinal fluid, CSF. It is a lymph-like watery fluid that surrounds and protects the brain within the skull. It also fills the central canal of the spinal cord. It acts as a shock-absorbing fluid and protects the brain from damage when it is subjected to sudden jerk. It supplies nutrients to the brain and collects and removes waste from the brain. It is also responsible for maintaining constant pressure inside the cranium. The nerves attached to the spinal cord have two types of connections or roots, one to the back or dorsal side and the other to the cord's front or ventral side. Charles Bell in Scotland and Francois Magendie in France in the early 19th century showed that these roots have different functions. If the dorsal roots of the experimental animal were cut, the animal made no obvious reaction. If the ventral roots were lightly touched, the muscles to which the nerve was connected twitched violently. In 1822, they suggested that the dorsal root carried messages of sensation inwards while the ventral pathway carried outwards the instruction for muscular contraction. A reflex is any response that occurs automatically without consciousness, and there are two types of reflexes. Simple or basic reflexes are inbuilt and unlearned responses. Many of the actions are simple reflexes such as sneezing, coughing, yawning, etc. Acquired or conditioned reflexes are the result of practice and learning. For example, playing a keyboard using a specific key on seeing a musical note is a conditioned reflex that required conscious training. Most of the reflex actions are monitored and controlled by the spinal cord, hence also known as spinal reflexes. The pathway taken by nerve impulse to accomplish reflex action is called the reflex arc. For more details about reflex arc and examples, watch the video on integrating pathways, nervous coordination. Now, let us know about peripheral nervous system, PNS. It is a vast system of the dorsal and ventral root nerve cell heads and the network of spinal and cranial nerves linked to the brain and the spinal cord on one end and muscles on the other end. The PNS can either involuntarily control several functions of regions like our internal organs, blood vessels, and smooth and cardiac muscles. So, it is called the autonomous nervous system. It has voluntary control of muscles of some areas of skin and the skeletal muscle. Autonomic nervous system, ANS. We have certain organs which are not working as per our will and function on their own. These organs are involuntary, but their functioning must be under the control of some nerves. These involuntary organs are connected and controlled by a set of peripheral nerves. This is called the autonomic nervous system. The ganglia near the vertebral column are connected to the spinal cord by nerves. The sympathetic system is formed by the chain of ganglia on either side of the vertebral column and the associated nerves. The parasympathetic system is formed by the nerves arising from the ganglia of the brain and the posterior part of the spinal cord. The sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system control opposite actions of parts or organs in the body. For example, certain involuntary actions like the reduction and expansion of the pupil of the eye. In a dark room, the increase in the diameter of the pupils allows more light into the eyes. When we come out of the dark room into broad daylight, the diameter of the pupil decreases, allowing less light into the eyes. Thank you.